Imagine being 12 years old, standing barefoot on hot asphalt, holding up goods for sale in the scorching Lagos sun, not because you want to, but because somewhere behind you, in a small room that smells of medicine and old wood, your mother is fighting to stay alive. And the only thing standing between her next treatment and death, is you. A 12-year-old boy. No father. No relative stepping up. Just you, your hustle, and a love so heavy it could break a grown man. Now ask yourself honestly, if that were your child, or if that were you at 12 years old, what would you do? Stay with me, because what this boy did will change the way you see struggle, love, and the quiet miracles that find people who refuse to give up. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. His name was Malik. Malik Adewale. Malik grew up in a one-room apartment in the Mushin area of Lagos, one of those neighborhoods where the streets are always loud, where generators hum all night, where the smell of fried akra mixes with open drainage in the morning air, and where survival is not a motivational quote, it is a daily reality. His mother, a woman named Yatund, had worked as a seamstress for most of her adult life. She was the kind of woman who sang while she sewed, who could make a child feel safe just by the way she called their name. She was not just Malik's mother, she was his whole world. Malik's father had left when Malik was only 4 years old. He had no memory of the man except for a single photograph his mother kept folded inside her Bible, a tall man with kind eyes who apparently was not kind enough to stay. Yatund never spoke badly about him. She would just look at that photograph sometimes when she thought Malik was asleep, and Malik would watch her from the corner of the room, watching her press her lips together like she was swallowing something painful. He never asked her about it. Even at a young age, Malik understood that some wounds you don't poke. You just let people carry them quietly. Life was not easy, but it was manageable. Yatund sewed clothes for neighbors, did alterations, made school uniforms for children on the street. She made enough to pay their rent, to feed them, to send Malik to the local primary school where he sat in a classroom with 40 other children and learned to love reading more than anything else. He was bright, his teachers always said so. The kind of child who asked questions that made adults pause. But brightness doesn't pay hospital bills. And that is where this story truly begins. It was a Tuesday in the middle of the rainy season when Yatund collapsed in her room. Malik had come home from school to find her on the floor beside her sewing machine, the fabric she had been working on still threaded through the needle, her body curled on its side like she had simply folded. He ran to her screaming, shaking her shoulders, and when she opened her eyes, she looked at him like she was looking at him from very far away. A neighbor helped carry her to a nearby clinic. The diagnosis came 2 days later. Kidney disease. Chronic. Progressive. And expensive to treat. Think about that moment for a second. You are 12. Your mother is your everything. And a doctor is using words you don't fully understand, but the look on everyone's face tells you that something is very, very wrong. How do you process that? How does a child carry that kind of news and still get up the next morning? Malik processed it the only way he knew how. He got to work. Within a week of his mother's diagnosis, he had stopped going to school. His teacher, a man named Mr. Bello, came to the house twice to beg him to come back, told him that education was the only way out, that his mother would want him in school. And Malik listened respectfully, nodded, and the moment Mr. Bello left, he went back to counting the little money he had saved in a small tin he kept under their mattress. He could not think about the future right now. He could only think about next week's dialysis appointment. The future would have to wait. Yatund begged him to go back to school. She would hold his hand from her mattress, her voice weaker than it used to be, and she would say, "Malik, I will be fine. Go and learn." And Malik would smile and say, "Yes, Mama," and then wake up at 5 in the morning, pack his tray of goods, and head to the streets. Because he had made a decision that no adult had asked him to make and no child should have to make, he had decided that keeping his mother alive was worth any sacrifice. Any sacrifice at all. So what was Malik selling? He started small. Very small. He had gone to a woman in the market named Mama Shade, a large woman with a loud laugh who had known Yatun for years, and he asked her to give him goods on credit, sachet water, biscuits, groundnuts, small sweets in transparent wrapping. Things children and workers buy without thinking. Mama Shade had looked at this small serious boy standing in front of her with his chin up, and she had felt something move in her chest. She gave him the goods. She told him to pay her back when he could. She did not make him feel small for asking. Every morning, Malik would be on the road before the sun fully rose. He had learned quickly which spots brought the most customers: outside the bus stop on the main road where conductors and passengers gathered, near the school gates just before morning assembly, along the stretch of road where Okada riders parked and waited for passengers. He would hold up his tray and call out in that clear, high voice of his, "Pure water, biscuit, groundnut. Come by." And people would look at this small boy and some would smile and buy and some would walk past without looking and some would give him more than the price without taking the goods and tell him to keep the change. Those were the ones that made his eyes sting. Not because he was sad, because he understood, even at 12, that there is a kind of kindness in the world that costs people nothing but means everything to the one receiving it. But kindness alone could not cover the cost of dialysis. And Yatun's condition was not waiting for anyone. Every week, Malik would count his money on the floor of their room, stacking the small naira notes carefully, adding up the coins, and comparing what he had to what was needed. Most weeks, he was short. And when he was short, he would go back to Mama Shade, go to their pastor's wife who sometimes helped, go to the neighbor who sold rice 3 doors down who would quietly press a folded note into his hand without a word. Malik kept a small notebook where he wrote down every name of every person who helped him, and next to each name he wrote the word "remember." He was going to pay every single one of them back. He did not know how or when. But he was going to. Now, this is the part of the story where I need you to pay attention, because this is where it gets hard. And I want you to ask yourself, how many adults do you know who would have this kind of discipline, this kind of quiet dignity, at 12 years old? It was a Thursday. Market day. The road was busier than usual and Malik had positioned himself near a junction where private cars slowed down because of traffic. He had expanded his goods by then. He now sold phone charging cables, small bottles of hand sanitizer, car fresheners that dangled from his tray on little hooks. He had been selling for nearly 4 months by this point and he had gotten better, faster, more confident. He could spot a customer before they even looked his way. A car slowed down beside him. A black SUV, the kind with tinted windows and a clean body that told you the person inside was comfortable. The window rolled down and a man looked out, well-dressed, a gold watch on his wrist, smelling of the kind of cologne that costs more than Malik's monthly earnings. The man looked at Malik's tray for a long time, then he looked at Malik, and he said, "How much for everything?" "All of it. I'll take everything on your tray." Malik's heart jumped. He had never sold everything at once. He quickly calculated in his head, if this man bought everything on his tray, he would clear enough to cover the next 2 dialysis sessions. Maybe even have something left over. He told the man the price. The man nodded, told him to bring it to the car boot, said he was getting his wallet from his bag in the back seat. Malik carried his tray to the back of the car, smiling, already thinking about his mother's face when he came home with the money. He was still smiling when the man's window went up, when the engine revved, when the car pulled out of traffic and disappeared around the corner. Just like that. The car was gone. The man was gone. And Malik was standing there on the roadside with an empty tray and no money and nothing to show for a full morning of work. He stood there for a very long time. People walked past him. Cars honked. The street continued being the street. And Malik stood there holding his empty tray, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling in short, controlled breaths. A woman selling tomatoes nearby had seen the whole thing. She came over and touched his shoulder and said, "Sorry, my Pekin. People no get shame." And that was what broke him, not the theft, not the cruelty, but those soft words from a stranger. He turned away from the woman so she would not see his face, and he let himself cry for exactly 2 minutes. He counted. 2 minutes. Then he wiped his face with the back of his hand, turned around, and walked back to Mama Shade's stall. He stood in front of Mama Shade and told her exactly what had happened. His voice did not shake. His eyes were dry. He just told her. And Mama Shade looked at this boy, this small, thin, exhausted, 12-year-old boy with the old eyes, and she did not say, "I told you to be careful," or "You should have known better." She just started loading up another tray. Can we just sit with that for a moment? Because I think about all the adults in this world who get knocked down once and decide that the world is against them. Malik got robbed, openly, in broad daylight, on a street full of people, and he went back to work the same day. The same day. What does that tell you about what was driving him? It was not ambition. It was not money. It was love. Pure, stubborn, unbreakable love for his mother. And that love would not let him stop. 2 weeks after the robbery, Yatund had a particularly bad night. Malik had woken up at around 2 in the morning to the sound of her coughing, a deep, rattling cough that scared him in a way that was different from the usual fear. He got up and brought her water and sat beside her on the mattress and held her hand until the coughing stopped. She looked at him in the dim light from the single bulb they kept burning low through the night, and she said, "Malik. If anything happens to me," he cut her off. "Nothing will happen to you, Mama." She tried again. He cut her off again. They stayed like that in silence, her hand in his, until she fell back asleep. He did not sleep again that night. He sat in the dark and did the math in his head for the 100th time, what he needed, what he had, what the gap was. The gap never seemed to close fast enough. And for the first time, sitting in that dark room listening to his mother breathe, Malik felt something close to hopelessness begin to knock at the door of his chest. He did not let it in. But he felt it knock. The next morning, he was back on the road. Tray on his head, voice clear and strong. "Pure water, biscuit, groundnut. Come by." It was a Friday. The kind of Friday in Lagos where the whole city seems to be moving at once, Okadas weaving, Danfos honking, people rushing, traders shouting. Malik had set up near a shopping plaza on a fairly busy road, one of those modern-looking ones with a glass front and cars parked neatly outside. He did not usually come this far from his regular spot, but a boy he knew had told him the customers here spent more freely on Fridays. He decided to try it. He had been there for about an hour when a black car pulled into the plaza parking lot. Not a flashy car, a clean, modest car, but well-maintained. The man who stepped out was tall, dressed simply in a plain shirt and dark trousers. He looked like someone who did not need to show you he had money because he already knew he had it. He was on his phone when he walked toward the plaza entrance, and he would have walked right past Malik, except that Malik, being Malik, called out clearly, "Uncle, pure water. Cold, cold." The man slowed down. He looked at Malik. Something in the way the man looked at him was different from how most people looked at him, not with pity, not with the distracted glance of someone who already decided they did not want anything. He actually looked at him. At his tray, at his clothes, at his face, at his eyes. Then he bought a bottle of water and asked, "How long you don been day sell here?" Malik told him he usually sold on the other road but was trying a new spot today. The man nodded. He started to walk away, then stopped. He turned back. "How old are you?" Malik told him 12. The man was quiet for a moment. "Why are you not in school?" And Malik, who had learned to give people a short answer to that question so they would not pity him or ask too many questions, surprised himself by telling this stranger the truth. All of it. His mother. The kidney disease. The dialysis. The tin under the mattress. The notebook with the names of people who had helped him and the word, remember, written next to each one. He did not know why he told this man everything. He would think about it later and not be able to explain it. There was just something about the way the man listened, completely still, phone put away, eyes fully on Malik, that made the words come out. The man was quiet for a long time after Malik finished. Then he said, "What is your mother's name?" Malik said, "Yatund." The man nodded slowly, like he was committing it to memory. Then he asked Malik to wait, went inside the plaza, came back out 20 minutes later, and handed Malik a card. He said, "I need to verify some things. But I want you to bring your mother's medical records to this address on Monday. Can you do that?" Malik looked at the card, then looked up at the man, and did what he had trained himself not to do in front of strangers. His eyes filled. He blinked it back fast. He said, "Yes, sir." The man's name, as it turned out, was Mr. Darius Okafor. And if you are thinking you know where this story is going, I want to tell you, you do not. Not fully. Because what Darius Okafor did was not just give money to a sick woman. What he did was far more complicated, far more human, and far more unexpected than that. Monday came. Malik had gathered every medical document he could find, every prescription, every hospital receipt, every doctor's note, everything his mother had accumulated over months of treatment. He put them all in a clear plastic bag and carried them on his chest like something precious, which to him they were, because they were the paper record of everything his mother had been fighting through. The address on the card was a clean office building not far from the island. Malik had taken 2 buses to get there, arriving 45 minutes early because he was afraid of being late. He sat in a small waiting area where a receptionist gave him a cup of juice and did not look at him like he did not belong there. When Darius Okafor came out to meet him, he was with a woman who was introduced as a doctor. They sat with Malik for almost 2 hours. They looked through every document. They asked calm, specific questions. Malik answered every one. 3 days later, Darius Okafor's team had arranged for Yatund to be transferred to a better hospital, one with proper equipment, proper care, a clean room, doctors who came to check on her every day. The dialysis schedule was taken over completely. Every bill, covered. Malik did not fully understand all the arrangements being made around him. Adults were calling each other, signing papers, organizing transport, but he understood the result. His mother was in a real hospital. She was being properly cared for. For the first time in months, when he sat beside her bed, the room did not smell like worry. Yatund held her son's hand in that hospital room and asked him who this man was, this Darius Okafor. Malik said honestly, "I don't know, Mama. I just told him the truth." Yatund looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then she said quietly, "God sent him." Malik said nothing. He just held her hand tighter. "But I need to tell you something important here, because this story does not end with a check being written and everyone living happily ever after. Real life is not that simple, and what happened next is what truly defines who Malik Adewale is." About 3 weeks after Yatund was settled in the hospital, Darius Okafor sat down with Malik alone. He asked him what he wanted, not for his mother, for himself. What did Malik want? And Malik, who had spent so many months thinking only of his mother that he had almost forgotten he was a separate person with his own future, went very quiet. He looked at his hands. He said, "I want to go back to school. Just that. Not money, not a car, not a house. School." Because somewhere in the back of his mind was Mr. Bello coming to his door twice, and his mother's voice saying, "Malik, I will be fine. Go and learn." Darius Okafor arranged it. He enrolled Malik in a proper school, not just any school, but a good one, with books and labs and teachers who had time for their students. He set up a small educational fund for him. He also quietly made sure that Yatun's treatment would continue to be funded for the foreseeable future. He did all of this not loudly, not publicly. He did it the way people do things when they are doing them for the right reasons. Now here is the part I want you to think about really carefully. Because someone watching this right now might be wondering, why? Why would a man like Darius Okafor, clearly successful, clearly busy, stop for a 12-year-old boy selling water outside a shopping plaza? What made him look twice? When a journalist asked Darius this question much later, his answer was simple. He said, "I was that boy once. Different city, different goods, same story." And that right there, that is the whole point of everything. The people who truly understand what it means to struggle are not always the most vocal about it. Sometimes they are the ones sitting quietly in a clean office, looking out the window, remembering a version of themselves that the world would never guess existed. And when they see that version walking on the road, they do not look away. Darius Okafor had grown up poor in Enugu. He had sold things on the street as a child. He had known hunger and uncertainty and the weight of depending on people who did not always show up. He had built his business over 20 years of disciplined, unglamorous work. And he had promised himself, though he had never told anyone this, that if he ever had the means, he would not walk past. He would stop. Now I want to ask you something directly. Is there someone in your life right now, maybe someone you walk past every day, maybe someone you've noticed but dismissed, who is carrying something this heavy? Because Malik's story is not rare. It is happening right now, in 100 cities, on 100 hot roads, on the backs of children who are too proud to beg and too desperate to stop. The question is not whether those people exist. The question is whether we stop. For months after entering his new school, Malik's report card came back and every single teacher had written something positive. His English teacher wrote, "This student reads as if he is always hungry for the next page." His mathematics teacher wrote simply, "Gifted. Do not let this one slip." Malik brought the report card to his mother's hospital room and read each comment out loud to her. Yatun listened with her eyes closed and a smile on her face that made the whole room feel different, lighter, somehow, like something had finally exhaled. She was improving. Slowly, carefully, with good care and consistent treatment, Yatun's condition was becoming more manageable. She was not cured. The disease was chronic and would require ongoing management for the rest of her life. But she was stable. She was there. She was alive. And she was listening to her son read his school report in a voice that was no longer the voice of a frightened child but the voice of someone who had discovered, through everything, who he actually was. 6 months after that day at the parking lot, Malik stood in front of Darius Okafor's office and handed him a small piece of paper. Darius unfolded it. On it was a handwritten list of names, each with an amount written beside it. Malik said, "I owe all these people money. From when they helped my mother and me. I'm going to pay them all back. I just wanted you to know." Darius looked at the list for a long time, then he looked at this boy, this 13-year-old now, a little taller, same serious eyes, and he said something Malik would remember for the rest of his life. He said, "Malik, a man who keeps a list like this will never be poor for long." I want to end this story not with a grand statement about success or wealth or rising from nothing, because Malik's story is still being written. He is young. The road ahead is long. But what I can tell you is this. He goes to school every morning with the same quiet determination he once carried on that road with his tray. He visits his mother every weekend. She is doing better. He still has that notebook with the names of everyone who helped him, and the word "remember" next to each one. And he has added one more name to the list, right at the bottom, with a note that says, "I don't know how yet. But I will." That name at the bottom is Darius Okafors. Now before I close, I want to ask you this. What would you have done if you were the person in that parking lot? Would you have stopped? Would you have bought the water and kept walking? Would you have said to yourself, "There are too many people like him, I cannot help everyone"? Because that is the thought most of us have. And it is not a bad thought, it is an honest one. But Darius chose differently. He chose to stop for one. Just one. And that one happened to be a boy who was holding up an entire family on his 12-year-old shoulders. And if you are someone right now who is in the middle of your own version of this story, selling on a street no one respects, caring for someone who needs you, staying up at night doing the math on what you do not have, I want you to hear this clearly. Your consistency in the middle of your pain is not invisible. It is being watched by someone. Not necessarily a billionaire. Not necessarily in a parking lot. But someone is watching. And your story is not over. Not even close. Malik's story is proof that love, when it is fierce enough, will find a way. And the world, when it is paying attention, will sometimes send you the help you have been too tired to ask for. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments, what part hit you the most? Was it the moment Malik was robbed and still went back to work? Was it the notebook with the names? Was it Darius's reason for stopping? I really want to know. And if you know someone right now who needs to hear a story like this, share this video with them. You might be doing for them what Darius did for Malik, showing up at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right thing. Subscribe if you have not already, and stay close. Because more stories like this are coming. Real ones. Human ones. The kind that remind you why people are still worth believing in.